Why have Colombia and the United States, two of the most influential countries in the Americas, found themselves locked in a growing conflict over tariffs and deportations? Recently, Colombia made a bold move by imposing a 25% tariff on U.S. goods in retaliation for controversial U.S. immigration policies, particularly those enacted during the Trump administration. This action ignited a major trade dispute that has the potential to escalate, disrupting the economic relations between these two nations. As both countries dig in their heels, one must ask, what happens next? Could this lead to more severe economic consequences, or might it offer a path toward resolution? Let's explore the origins and complexities behind this high-stakes conflict. At the heart of the clash lies a diplomatic dispute over deportation flights. In 2022, Colombian President Gustavo Petro, who had taken office with a progressive platform, made a bold decision that would set the stage for tensions with the U.S. Petro rejected a U.S. request to allow military planes to transport deported migrants back to Colombia. This move quickly sparked a sharp backlash from Washington. In retaliation, the United States imposed sanctions on Colombia and initiated a 25% tariff on Colombian goods. What began as a political disagreement quickly transformed into a full-blown economic standoff, with both countries now facing heightened tensions and unpredictable outcomes. To understand how we got here, we need to examine the broader issue of immigration, which lies at the center of this conflict. Under the Trump administration, U.S. immigration policy took a hardline stance, aggressively pursuing the deportation of undocumented migrants. Many of these individuals were sent back to their home countries, including Colombia, on U.S. military planes. As part of this policy, the U.S. government reached out to several countries, including Colombia, asking them to accept the deported migrants. While this may have been a straightforward request for many nations, for Colombia, the decision was far from simple. President Petro, elected on a platform of social justice and human rights, viewed the treatment of migrants as a central moral issue. He believed that migrants should not be treated as criminals, but as individuals in need of protection and compassion. For Petro, accepting U.S. deportation flights would have meant complicity in what he saw as an inhumane system. He rejected the idea, fearing that the deported individuals would face mistreatment and a lack of dignity under the U.S.'s tough immigration policies. Petro's refusal wasn't just a political stance. It was a reflection of Colombia's broader commitment to human rights and its long-standing struggles with migration issues. Throughout his campaign, Petro had promised to protect vulnerable populations, including migrants, and to uphold progressive values. By rejecting the deportation flights, he was sending a clear message that Colombia would not align itself with U.S. policies that it viewed as harmful to human dignity. This was a bold and controversial stand that quickly drew the attention of the Trump administration. On the U.S. side, the rejection was seen as a direct challenge to its efforts to control illegal immigration and maintain strong diplomatic relations with one of its closest allies in the region. For the Trump administration, Colombia's refusal was an affront to U.S. sovereignty and an obstacle to its immigration enforcement strategy. The U.S. viewed this as a breakdown in diplomatic cooperation and a sign that Colombia was prioritizing its political stance over its relationship with a key ally. In response to this diplomatic fallout, the U.S. imposed a range of economic sanctions on Colombia, including the highly significant 25% tariff on Colombian exports. This tariff hit a wide array of goods central to Colombia's economy, including coffee, flowers, and textiles, industries that depend heavily on U.S. imports. The move immediately escalated the conflict, transforming it from a political disagreement into a serious economic confrontation. The new tariff made it clear that the U.S. was willing to use economic leverage to pressure Colombia into compliance with its policies. The imposition of such a large tariff marked a turning point in U.S.-Colombia relations, shifting them from a historically close partnership to one marked by serious tension. For Colombia, the tariff had significant economic ramifications. The U.S. is one of Colombia's largest trading partners, and the tariff impacted industries that rely on U.S. markets. The Colombian government now faced the dilemma of balancing its political stance on migration with the economic realities of a trade war with one of its most important allies. This trade war has already had ripple effects throughout both countries. For Colombia, the tariff threatened to undermine years of economic progress, especially in sectors like agriculture and manufacturing. On the U.S. side, the dispute raised questions about the future of U.S.-Latin America relations. Colombia is a critical player in the region, and any long-term breakdown in relations could have implications for trade, security, and regional cooperation. Beyond the immediate economic consequences, the conflict highlights deeper issues of national sovereignty, human rights, and international diplomacy. It underscores the complex nature of global alliances, where political differences, particularly on sensitive issues like immigration, can quickly escalate into broader disputes that affect trade, security, and global standing. As both sides dig in their heels, the real question is, what happens next? Will this trade war eventually lead to a breakthrough in diplomacy, or will it mark the beginning of a long and damaging standoff between Colombia and the U.S.? More importantly, what does this conflict mean for the future of international cooperation in the Americas? The situation is still unfolding, and the stakes couldn't be higher. Whether this dispute becomes a catalyst for reform and cooperation, or further fuels division between these two nations remains to be seen. One thing is clear, however. The fallout from this conflict will be felt for years to come, affecting not only the economic and diplomatic landscape of Colombia and the U.S., but potentially the entire region. The relationship between the United States and Colombia has always been a cornerstone of strong economic ties, with the U.S. standing as Colombia's largest trade partner. This partnership has primarily been built around key Colombian exports, including crude oil, coffee, and fresh flowers, all of which are crucial to the nation's economy. However, the sudden tariff increase threw a significant wrench into this long-standing trade relationship, drastically altering the flow of goods between the two nations. For Colombia, the impact of these tariffs was felt quickly, especially in industries heavily dependent on U.S. markets. Take the flower industry, for example. Colombia is the world's leading exporter of fresh-cut flowers, and the U.S. is its biggest customer, importing roughly 80% of all Colombian flowers. With the new 25% tariff in place, Colombian flowers became much more expensive for American consumers, leading to a drop in demand. This jeopardized the livelihoods of thousands of Colombian flower farmers, many of whom were now facing an uncertain future. The oil industry, another vital sector for Colombia, wasn't spared either. The U.S. relies on Colombia as its fourth largest supplier of crude oil, and American refineries have long depended on Colombian oil to meet their energy demands. The new tariffs made this oil less accessible, increasing costs for U.S. businesses and creating a ripple effect throughout the economy. Additionally, Colombia's coffee industry faced its own set of challenges. The U.S. is one of the largest consumers of Colombian coffee, and the tariff put this trade relationship at risk. For Colombian coffee farmers, who rely on export revenues to sustain their communities, the rising costs made it harder to maintain a steady income. What was once a reliable market became much less dependable, as tariffs made Colombian coffee more expensive for U.S. consumers. While American businesses were less affected by these tariff increases compared to Colombia's industries, there were still consequences. The U.S. had become accustomed to affordable raw materials and agricultural products from Colombia, and the increased import costs started to push prices up for U.S. businesses, leading to inflation and a higher cost of living for American consumers. This trade disruption demonstrated just how interconnected the economies of both nations really are. Shortly after the tariff increase, Colombia imposed its own retaliatory 25% tariff, with the possibility of it rising to 50%. Tensions escalated, but the U.S. quickly stepped in to resolve the situation, seeking to avoid further damage. After intense negotiations, a deal was struck. Colombia agreed to accept U.S. deportation flights again, including those involving military planes. However, the deal came with significant conditions.